Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're following on from looking at price elasticity of demand, and now we're going to be looking at price elasticity of supply. So, of course, what that is a measure of is the responsiveness of quantity supplied of a good to a change in its price. So we know that as price goes up, producers are going to want to supply more, but how much more will they supply given a price change? That's what price elasticity of supply attempts to determine. So same equation, except we're just substituting quantity supplied for quantity demanded. So let's look at an example here. Christmas trees. So it's a Christmas tree farm here. What happens? Price increases by 30%. Much, for whatever reason, a lot more people want to have a natural tree in the house. So price increases by 30%, but the quantity supplied, that's not going to increase by much at all. That's going to only increase by, say, 2%, because a Christmas tree farm, they can't just grow more trees, right? They don't have any available. What might happen is that some people who have the right sort of tree, they might go, oh, look, it's actually worth my while to sell this tree now. Like that's actually worth it. So it might get a few more on sale, but really, they're not able to really respond. They're not able to really be responsive to the change in price, right? So this is inelastic supply. So we plug the numbers in, we get that low number below 1, inelastic, just like it was for PED, it is for PES as well. So greater than 1, elastic, less than 1, inelastic. Same as it was for price elasticity of demand. So that makes it a bit easier to remember, I think. Okay, again, we're going to look at the determinants of price elasticity of supply. And again, I've got a mnemonic device for you. So this is just a sort of master list here. Production time, storability, spare capacity, substitutability of factors of production, and last one, time period considered. So that makes the word psst, like you're trying to get someone's attention sort of surreptitiously, psst, right? Okay, let's go through them one by one. So firstly, production time. If something has a long production time, they're not well able to respond to a change in price. So something like apples, the price of apples doubles overnight. The producers want to sell more apples, but guess what? Apples take a long time to grow, so they can't, right? And short production time, they are able to respond. So things that can be produced quickly, they're generally going to be manufactured goods, right? So things like DVDs, really quick, you're just pressing a few buttons in the factory and then out come 1,000 more of the same DVD. And things like the fashion industry, pretty quick. They've got very quick turnarounds. You might have heard the term fast fashion, not sure. But if price goes up, if there's a trend in one type of clothing, they will get that out into the shops as soon as possible, very quickly. They will be able to respond. Okay, storability. When a good is durable, it can be stored until such a time as it is required to respond to demand. So we've got elastic supply there. So, for example, most manufactured goods, right? Especially if they're small, it doesn't cost much to store them if they're small. If they're like cars, they're not quite as responsive to price because they do take up a lot of space and that's a lot of expense. But something really small, so back to those DVDs, you can have a warehouse full of DVDs or a box full of DVDs. There I am pointing at the screen again. One of these boxes full of DVDs could have, a couple of thousand in there. It doesn't cost much to store. Some things don't store well. Perishable goods. So milk, right? Meat, fruit, vegetables, all that. And also a service, right? So this hairdresser, you can't store up your hairdressing service for when demand is high. There's only one of you, so you can only cut one person's hair at a time. So you can't store it up. It's only as demanded, so it can't be that responsive to a change in demand. Now I'm saying responsive to a change in demand. the demand is probably what's fueling the price increase, right? Okay, substitutability of factors of production. This is how well the factors of production, so your land, labor, capital, can be substituted to producing something else. So if your factors of production are non-substitutable, so I've got a capital I in there for some reason, you've got inelastic supply. So if your resource can only be used for one good, that makes all your other goods to have pretty inelastic supply because you can't take that resource and put it elsewhere. So for example, in a car factory, you might have these little robots that help put together a car. Some of them might be really specific. They can only do one sort of car. So that even if demand skyrockets for a slightly different model of car from the same car maker, they can't use those resources to put towards the other car. So it would make them relatively unresponsive to a change in price. And here, that's like a roll of steel. That's what steel can look like. So if your resources is really just making things out of steel, then that resource is quite substitutable. You can put it towards all different sorts of uses. That tends to have elastic supply. Producers can respond to a change in price. All right. Spare capacity. I think I did these in a different order from my first list. If the business can increase production within its current resource constraints, that means elastic supply. Now that's a bit of a word salad there. How much sense does it make? If you've got spare capacity, if it doesn't cost you too much to increase your production, then you're more likely to respond to that change in price. I'll give you an example. Tesla, they had a lot of demand for their cars, right? They're a very popular car brand. So they introduced a third shift in a factory in Berlin, and that was to respond to the higher price, which is from demand, right? So third shift in a factory, what that means, it's 24 hours in a day, you got 8-hour shifts. So they were already working 2 of those shifts, so 16 hours. What they then did was just keep it going those other 8 hours. So they added a third shift. It wasn't too costly. All they needed was the extra resources, so the extra raw materials, I guess, and the labor, right? Whereas compare that to if the production was already at full capacity, they wouldn't be able to respond. They would have to build an entire new factory, which could take months, a year, for example. They wouldn't be able to respond. We would have inelastic supply. Okay, last one. The time period considered. So this is very similar to what we saw with price elasticity of demand. In the short run, supply tends to be relatively more inelastic as firms have little time to reorganize their resources. In the long run, more elastic. So let's look at an example where you are. Well, you should be at home, but Woodcroft College, it's got, my understanding is there are wait lists to enroll in the school, for parents to enroll their children in the school. So there might be sort of high demand, and in the short term, they can't really respond to that because there's only so many buildings, only so many classrooms for children to learn in. But in the long run, if they know that this demand is going to be sustained, what they can do is they can go and build a new building, right? Let's increase our capacity over time. So in the long run, we're able to do things like build new buildings, but in the short run, we don't have that option. That's just not an option in the short run to just magic up a building, right? So these are our determinants, price elasticity of supply. So we will go through some activities in class to make sure we fully understand. Thank you.